Good morning, everyone. Lots going on. As usual, today is August 9th, 2023, and news outlets are calling out Meta over the government's bill. So they're saying Meta doesn't want to pay their fair share. Where they're blocking our links. But the government said, if you want to link to these places, you have to pay them. And Meta said, we don't want to pay them, so we have to stop linking to them, following the government's rules and recommendations as the bill is written. So, and I don't think you can just call up somebody and say, hey, we'd really like you to pay for this other business. It doesn't work like that. So the government doing that is very, very strange. More election ads are being put out by Polyev, and Justin Trudeau is trying to appeal to your average voter by taking his kids to the movies, which is weird because he just asked for privacy. Best Buy puts its racist hiring practices in writing, and they're being shared on social media, so I'll show you that. 4 states asked for their electoral votes to be sent back from Mike Pence, but nobody's ever heard that before. And I'm going to show you a couple of clips at the end of the show looking into U.S. politics and tell you what I think about that, because there's interesting movement there. And the removal of John A. Macdonald continues across Canada. There are a whole bunch of places that are trying to, instead of highlight John A. Macdonald as the first Prime Minister of Canada and so on and so forth, just remove him because they don't like him anymore. They're leftists, and they don't like the old Prime Minister or the first Prime Minister. It's communist. It's reminiscent of the Great Leap Forward, and I don't like any of it, and I'll show that to you. So there's lots to get to. Let's get started. And first, we're going to be starting with with this. This is Joe Rogan and a friend of his talking about, is there anywhere you'd move to at all other than the United States? And Joe starts talking about Canada, and I think it's worthwhile listening to what he has to say about Canada, because, yeah, pretty spot on. Here we go.
Would you ever consider living in another country?
I would have said Canada up until recently. Now Canada's fucking falling apart. All the shit that they did during COVID was just the total wrong direction. The trucker convoy, when they froze people's bank assets.
You can't make honking your horns illegal.
Bro, they froze people's bank accounts that donated money to the convoy. That's crazy. That's crazy.
And what's so
peaceful protest, which everybody's supposed to be all about.
Right.
These people that were protesting COVID vaccine mandates and
right.
the lockdowns, and they fucking went after the people that donated, which is crazy.
Yeah. And you can track all that shit. And
yeah.
They tracked everything.
They shut their bank accounts down.
That's
man.
crazy, man.
You
can't buy fucking a piece of toast.
That makes people self-censor. And that's the terrifying aspect of that. And that's the thing that people won't say, it's not that big of a deal. They gave them their bank accounts back eventually. Look, that's sending a very...
Eventually? What does that even fucking mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
It's sending a very clear message that they can fuck with you in ways that you probably hadn't thought about before. They can fuck with your money. They can close your bank
Never
down.
even thought about it.
Never thought about it.
Never even thought about it.
Yeah.
The process is the punishment is one of the things that keeps coming up, keeps popping up when talking about what's happening to people like Tamara Litch and Chris Barber and the people who are going on trial for this. Weirdly, a whole bunch of the leadership of the Freedom Convoy isn't going on trial, just Tamara Litch and a couple of the main ones, right? The people who flocked to them and helped them and negotiated with the government and all sorts of other stuff. People who are making calls, making deals, backroom deals, all sorts of other stuff. No. There's nothing to say about them, obviously. This was Tamara Litch, and she was the mastermind. Very, very interesting situation. The whole thing is just, it stinks, and I don't believe a word out of anybody's mouth. But I think that it's very, very interesting, the point that that Joe Rogan's making. Trudeau, Freeland went after people's bank accounts. It's censoring, but at the same time, they can mess with you in ways that you had never even considered possible before, right? People felt secure sharing their details on social media. They were proud of where they worked, proud of the things they produced, proud of the way they spent their days, and they'd share that on social media, and that's now been weaponized to the point where people don't post on Facebook anymore. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said people our age don't post on Facebook. Like if you're in a group and you're in a paintballing group or something like that, maybe you post on Facebook to the group, right? But generally those people are going to dox you and send something to your employer to get you fired, right? But if you post on general Facebook, maybe one of your friends is now Antifa, and maybe your scalp is one that they can show off to their friends. Look, I got blah fired, right? Because of the posts on Facebook or whatever. And so they do that. And because of that, the speech generally is much more censored, right? Very scary stuff. Let's get into Trudeau and electioneering. I think election's coming because it seems like everybody's trying to get on the voters' good side. Trudeau is trying to do it. He can't do it through policy because his policies are absolutely garbage and they're leading to everything costing more and people blaming him for it, which is good. So he took his son to see Barbie and now he's taking his daughter to see Oppenheimer, right? You see what he's doing there, and he's just rage farming at this point in time because there's a whole bunch of people who didn't like the post, and I guess a whole bunch of people who did. So now he's just trying to do more of that, doubling down on the division, which is classic Trudeau generally. That's what he does. Here's Pierre Poilievre, and they're using the same footage, but here's a 30-second ad from Poilievre and then a minute-long ad. The minute-long ad is narrated by his wife. So this is the image. This one starts both, and I thought that was weird. I thought that was kind of interesting. Oh, it doesn't start this one, but it's in this one. So here, we'll start with the second one. It's a minute long. This is Poilievre's wife.
Who is Pierre Poilievre? Many know him as the common sense leader the country needs. His school teacher parents know him as the boy they adopted and raised in their modest home in the suburbs of Calgary. His dad knows him as the son he took to early morning hockey games. His neighbors know him as the boy who used to deliver the morning newspaper. His children know him in Francais, Espanol, and English as Papa. And I know him as a guy who loves me for who I am, a Canadian who came to call Canada home, and his wife. So when Pierre says, it doesn't matter who you know or where you're from, but rather who you are and where you're going, these aren't just empty words. He's lived it. Common sense. Let's bring it home.
So very election, getting to know you, introducing Poilievre to people who may not have heard of him before, etc., etc. Soft language from somebody, obviously his wife, but sounds like she's practiced in giving kind of voiceovers and things like that, but it's meant to appeal to a broad voter base, not your usual conservative voter. This is for people who are just entering the party, right? So this is top of funnel if you're talking advertising. This is broad appeal, and that's what you're trying to get, right? This is a little bit more hard-nosed, but not that much more. I'd still say we're in the broad appeal area, but it's a little bit more, somebody's interested in politics and they're checking the party out. Do they have what it takes, but this is ABC election stuff, and the reason I'm showing it to you is because it's ABC election stuff and we're 2 years out from an election, so that's weird, right? That's notable. Here we go.
Everything feels broken in Canada. Unaffordable, unsafe, divided. But we can put the pieces back together with a government that lives within its means, leaves more in your pocket, and lets you get ahead, that protects our streets and unites our people in the Canada we know and love. Let's bring it home.
So there you go. The Bring It Home branding, they're definitely using that. That's going forward. I don't know if that's going to lead us into the next election. That'd be a long time if it did. But, it would get, people would know exactly who you were talking about, right? So, which is what you want in sloganeering, which is what you want in branding. These things are taking shape. It's notable. Again, we're a while out from the next election, or are we, right? Michael Barrett says, when are Canadian taxpayers going to get back the $250 million that Justin Trudeau gave to the Beijing Communist Party-controlled bank, right? This is the Globe and Mail talking about Asian Infrastructure Bank, too intertwined with Beijing. Yeah, shocking. Shocking. I think they knew that. I think they knew that when we invested $600 billion into it, right? Was it $600 billion? I think it was $600 billion. And so, is this something that's going to come up? Yeah, it's a little bit in the weeds for most people. Most people aren't interested in that. They're interested in the waste of money, but then how explaining it, they're not that interested. They just say, did that happen? And you say, yes. And then they say, okay, that's terrible. And that's it. That's very interesting. They don't want to actually have details. Polling Canada is reporting on the recent by-election. The Liberals lost a seat and the Conservatives gained a seat. This was Twila Gross wins the Preston by-election. The Preston by-election was in Nova Scotia. So very interesting there. The Liberals are starting to lose seats to the Conservatives, and the trend in the polling, and Polling Canada is putting this out, is that the Conservatives are within majority striking territory. They're 165 and a majority is 170. So is that possible? Sure. Is it a changing of the guard from one group of people who are doing the WEF or somebody else's bidding to another group of people who are doing the WEF or somebody else's bidding? 2030 agenda? What's that? Says Pierre Poilievre. So, maybe. But a lot of people, a lot of Canadians will really like this. And regardless of what you tell them, they don't want to hear the details. It's so weird. It's such a weird thing. You could say, yeah, I mean, that's technically true. He said he's going to do these things, but also, right, he also says that healthcare, he'll import all these people. Well, right, but, so what's the end result of this is going to be that the average Canadian feels like things have slowed down because economically they're not under such an attack. But I think in reality, they're going to increase immigration even more. Trudeau's immigration minister wants to increase immigration because the demand is so high for jobs and people to fill those jobs, etc. But we're also seeing high unemployment in Canada. So how can we justify this? They'll just magic it up like they magicked up the COVID numbers, right? Honestly, very, very scary stuff. But it feels like electioneering. This is just something that doesn't have anything to do with electioneering. This is just our government and the embarrassment that is our government at this point in time. Jeremy Mackenzie is sharing this. Humiliation continues. The humiliation of Canada continues. Yes, this is in fact both the official Canadian Forces social media accounts used to recruit and advertise to citizens and a brand new low of pathetic. This is all you need to know to determine whether or not Canada is a serious country. And they've got cats in tactical gear, and it says, Happy International Cat Day. Yes, we do have a super secret and furry special cat ops team. However, getting them to follow commands is proving difficult. So there's two. Instagram. These are both on Instagram. I don't do Instagram, so there you go. But very weird. Just weird stuff. Weird stuff that doesn't have anything to do with governing the country and instead seems to just be teabagging people who want to be seriously talking about the issues and coming up with solutions that are workable, right? Cats in tactical gear on Instagram. Come on, guys, what the heck are we doing? And I mean, I'm not even a general. I mean, remember Police Academy? You don't want the sergeant to come in here or you don't want the top brass to see what we're doing. This is crazy, right? You wouldn't put cats on social media in the 1980s. I don't think, right? Somebody would have a big problem with that. If you went to, if you're going to be a police officer and you went to like their boot camp, I can't remember the name of the boot camp, but Police Academy? No, that's a movie. Maybe Police Academy. Or boot camp. And you did something wrong, like not making your bed to the standard that they told you, or not wearing your beret right, or not tucking your pants in right. They would chew you out. They would yell at you and scream at you. So the movies have told me. I've never been to boot camp or Police Academy. But fundamentally, now they'd say, could you make your bed again? It seems like it's wrinkly. And then you'd put on your cat thing and say, I need a safe space. You're making me feel sad. And that's acceptable these days. And that's a big problem. So I feel like the 1980s were better. I was trying to show my son G.I. Joe, and he did not like the cartoon as much as I did. Maybe next year. Although I find the 80s cartoons are a little bit slow. Like nowadays they've really got, and there are some good cartoons out there. Phineas and Ferb are pretty good. Muppet Babies are pretty good, but they did have Gonzo become a transgender. So there you go, in one of the episodes. But there are good kid cartoons out there, and the storytelling's much better. Inspector Gadget followed like an adult themed everything basically, and now the shows are much more geared to kids, and the shows are much quicker to get into. There's not as much lead time, so on and so on. So I'm not surprised that kids don't like G.I. Joe, but kind of disappointed because the 80s were great, man. Ben, let's talk about COVID. Ben says German government confirms that there is no data that can back up the claims that COVID-19 vaccinated people have better health outcomes. So the translation is, sorry that I'm bending over here, it's hard to read. Does the federal government have figures from placebo-controlled, randomized, and blinded scientific studies that prove statistically significant, or that provide statistically significant evidence that subjects treated with the substance BN, the mRNA vaccines from BioNTech, and Pfizer have overall suffered from fewer medical undesirable events and subjects who received the placebo than subjects who received the placebo, and if so, what are they, and what is the date of the most recent analysis of the numbers, at which time, though certain placebo-controlled randomized binders were met. No, the federal government does not have such figures. So this is translated on the document, and it's got the German document right underneath it so you can see. And sorry for my slow reading, it's just a little small. But that's interesting, right? That's notable. It seems like by hook or by crook, the truth is coming out. And I really feel like we weren't supposed to come out of COVID. We were supposed to stay locked down forever. And the fact that we're not locked down forever is a big screw up. And now they're trying to figure out how to lock us down again, where we will be locked down through fear and we'll self-govern our lockdown. They're going to come up with another pandemic. They're going to try anyway. And nah. Maxime Bernier is responding to Lindsay, and she says, I was fired from my nursing career over 20 months ago for being unvaccinated. I'm still being discriminated against to this day. There are thousands of healthcare workers in the same boat as me. And Maxime Bernier says, bring all the unjustly fired unvaccinated healthcare workers back to work before importing thousands of foreign ones. Right. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that there is absolutely no reason to focus on anything else until we have that problem solved. Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, Canada has over 50,000 immigrant doctors and nurses blocked from working in our hospitals. Conservatives will bring in a blue seal test so those who can pass it can get to work within 60 days. Better healthcare, better paychecks. Let's bring it home. The unfortunate part is ACE is responding. The answer is easy, Pierre. Get your head out of the sand. You're appealing to immigrants to build your vote banks like Trudeau. Rehire the healthcare workers you helped Trudeau fire. Serve Canadians or resign. I think it's pretty simple. And focusing on people who are here already is an interesting pivot, because this is a different message than the message before. The message before was we're going to bring people here to solve this problem. Now the message is the people are already here. We can just activate them, right? Different messaging. It's it's a small pivot. It's a very small pivot, but there is a pivot. The message is different, but it's still appealing to a foreign or immigration-focused crowd, and it's not appealing to or discussing at all the healthcare workers who were unvaccinated and who are available to be activated too, right? And the absence is notable. Whittingstein says researchers hope 3-in-1 jab will ease vaccine fatigue. It's being trialed in Queensland targeting COVID, the flu, and serious respiratory issues. The 3-in-1 jab, COVID, okay, I've heard of that before from 2020. The flu, I've heard of that one too, but not since 2020. Wink. And serious respiratory issues, such as... I feel like there's information missing here. Here's just a little bit of this report. It's a minute 36. I'm just going to play as much of it as makes sense.
Carolyn Rose is fit, firing, and no stranger to a needle.
I'm a baby boomer, and I've had all my vaccinations in childhood.
The 72.
Why is this suddenly a virtue? Oh, I've been vaccinated. Oh, I've got all my vaccinations. Oh, get lost.
2-year-old from the Gold Coast is serious about her health.
I'm passionate about the effectiveness and the power of vaccine.
So much so, she's taking part in a new vaccine trial launched by the University of the Sunshine Coast.
If successful, will ultimately help participants receive, one dose, and that could be potentially covered for all three.
A 3-in-1 Moderna mRNA vaccine designed to battle COVID, the flu, and respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, all at the same time.
RSV. Other respiratory virus. Thanks. Great. Yes, another mRNA. Been developed super quick. It'll work for everything. Just let us inject you with our experimental thing. The idea that being vaccinated is equal to virtuous or good or whatever, it's just compliance. It's not good. It's just compliance. Those are different. And sure, the person who wants your compliance may reward you in the same way you would get rewarded for being good, but it's not you're not being good. You're not being virtuous. You're not being a good person by listening. You're just being compliant. Dr. Simon Goddick goes through 20 other things that could be causing your heart disease, not the mRNA vaccines. Over the past 3 years, he says, journalists have come up with many reasons for the rise in heart damage, showering, for example. However, none blame it on the experimental gene therapy administered to billions around the globe. Let me walk you through my top 20 reasons in this thread. Heart attack, the shower habit that could precipitate a heart attack in the healthy. This is Express UK. And number 2, he says, number 1, the weather. Both summer and winter temperatures, according to mainstream journalists, are to blame for increased number of heart diseases or blood clots. It seems we're just in for a heart-stopping season no matter the weather. Cold snap causes strokes and heart attacks, doctors warn, and your blood will thicken and then clot, what extreme heat can do to your body. This is the Telegraph. Number 2, artificial sweeteners. According to a study, artificial sweeteners are responsible for an increase in heart attacks. Guess that's just another bitter finding in the world of science. Haha, clown world, right? Artificial sweeteners linked to increased heart risk, and he goes through all of them, right? Climate change could hurt babies' hearts, right? Oh, that climate change is hurting my heart. Green fingers, urgent warning to gardeners as soil increases the risk of killer heart disease. Dun dun dun! Too much exercise can kill you, especially if you're white. Study finds 7.5 hours a week of fitness doubles your risk of heart attacks. Excuse me, heart disease. Heart disease, my bad. The Mirror is reporting being too happy could cause you to have a heart attack. When did the National Enquirer go mainstream everywhere? Express UK again. Blood clots, the popular breakfast food that could enhance the risk of blood clotting. Soaring heart attacks due to lack of masking. Oh yes. Falling asleep with the TV on could bring early death. And so on, and so on, and so on. And it's not true. It's just a lie. And the lie is to get your compliance. And if they get your compliance, they'll say, good boy. Good boy. They'll pat you on the head, right? Here's Cat Turd. And Cat Turd is responding to the New York Post. New York Post, no word of a lie. 16 hours ago, this is the headline with a masked Statue of Liberty as the media for accompanying this headline. COVID cases spike 55% in New York. Doctors fear frightening new variants. That's not how vaccines work. Or, excuse me, that's not how viruses work. Viruses, if they mutate, they're less bad with every mutation. And to the point where people just go, I may have had a virus, but nothing happened to me. I didn't feel anything. There was a truck going by there. CTV News. So it's just lies. It's just lies. And Catturd says, imagine falling for this BS again, right? Imagine, just imagine falling. Imagine thinking that was real. Nobody's going to fall for this. Like I said, nobody will be locked down for climate or COVID anymore. The only thing they might believe, and this would be until they started being hungry enough to say, well, we might as well try, right? We might as well try. And when they hear the government say, no, you're not allowed to try because it's radiated soil, they'll say this is bullshit. But radiation, nuclear radiation. People believe in nuclear to a degree where they would believe that if the government said radiation is blown into the soil and we can't eat this food, they would say destroy it. Fine. So I could see that we could be closed into cities through wind currents and radiation. They would do that. I could see a situation where they're saying Ukraine has gone nuclear and we have fallout and this is where the fallout is, so you can't go in these places. But again, people would say, well, we might as well try because if we don't try, like we're going to starve if we don't try. And so trying will give us hope and maybe it'll work, right? Or starve and just sit here and accept our starving, and we're not going to do that. So when the government says, no, you can't try, people are going to get upset, right? And it's the same with, no, you can't not be vaccinated. You can't say no to this mandatory gene therapy we're going to force on you, right? It's the same thing. When it was live and let live and you could make up your mind and everything was fine, everything was open, blah, 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 people don't care. But now, you're losing your job if you're not doing what you're told, which is a big problem. CTV News is reporting, let's talk about free speech. News publishers and broadcasters call for investigation into Meta's news news blocking. And Wolf says perfectly, absolutely perfectly. Investigate what? Canada passed C-18 requiring them, Meta and Google, to revenue share if Canadian news content is shared on their on their platform. It's a private industry, and they don't want to pay, and so they aren't carrying the content. Investigation over. What's the CRTC going to do? Write them an angry letter? We don't like that you are not carrying our news. Please carry our news. No. I wouldn't even open the letter. I'd just shred it. I'd take a video, shred it, and put it on social media. Say, I didn't read your letter. Because your law is stupid. Duh. Here is Corey Morgan. He's responding to Pascal Saint-Onge. And Pascal Saint-Onge is the heritage minister who took over for Pablo Rodriguez. And she says exactly the same attack line that Pablo Rodriguez was saying with this. Meta is blocking access to news in Canada on Facebook and Instagram because they refuse to pay their fair share for news on their platform. The Online News Act is not blocking news. Meta is. No, actually, the Online News Act says Meta has to pay if they carry the links. And so Meta said, we're not going to carry the links because we're not going to pay. And so it's the law. It's the law that's doing this. Simple, plain and simple. And there is nothing the Canadian can do about it. The Canadian government can do about it because there is nothing that the Canadian government doesn't have the clout to stop or to force Meta to get into the news industry in Canada. They can't say, hey, you American company, you have to start writing news articles in Canada because we made a law. They'd say, ha, no, it's that simple, no. And that would be that. Like, your law be damned, right? Like, I'm pretty sure you can't use laws to force people into businesses they don't want to pursue, right? If you wrote a law to say that I had to be a bicycle or an ice cream salesman on a bicycle, I'm probably not going to do that. Like, what's the fine? Great, I'll take the fine, and then I'll fight you in court because this is a stupid law. Like, holy smoke, right? It's crazy. So Meta is responding to the Canadian government's law in the only way they could respond to it, really. And Corey Morgan points this out. He says Meta and Facebook, Meta, Instagram, and Google are doing this because they refuse to accept your shakedown over posting links. If it was worth that much to them, they wouldn't block the links, would they? Now, take the loss and repeal C-18. It failed, idiot. Yep. Rebel News is reporting on this as well. News publishers and broadcasters are requesting Canada's Competition Bureau intervene in Meta's decision to censor Canadian news from Facebook and Instagram. So, the Competition Bureau? Okay. So, can the Competition Bureau force you into a business you don't want to be in? Should I have to be a toboggan salesman, right? If somebody wants, if a ski hill is upset that a business is doing well or is not doing well enough or something like that, should the government be able to call me and say, you have to run this business now? We've decided that you have to run a toboggan hill because the ski hill is upset? No. So why should Meta have to run a news business because the news businesses are upset? Doesn't make sense. Get lost, right? These people are idiots. They don't have any idea how to run things. The thing is, most people barely have control of themselves. They can't control other people. They just say, when the other people fail to do the thing that they said, well, that's your failing, right? But you can't if you can't control yourself, you can't tell somebody else to do something, right? Unless you're a parent, and then you're presumably trying to train the kid how to hold themselves accountable and do it for themselves when they're old enough, right? But most people have a hard time holding themselves accountable for the things they're trying to do. And the escape from that is to tell somebody else to do something. And when they fail, say, well, that was clearly your problem and not mine. Not my responsibility. I told you what to do. You just didn't do it. Right? But most people tell themselves what to do and then they just don't do it. So weird. It's such a weird thing. Anyway, most people don't have control of themselves. So it's weird that the government is trying to make other people, successful businesses, prop up the failing businesses because the government keeps screwing them up. It's wild. It's so crazy. Rebel News is reporting this as well. City councillors in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, are considering removing the name of Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A Macdonald, from a local road. I think if anybody proposes erasure of history and a Great Leap Forward China-style Maoist takeover, they should be removed from their position, right? We should get rid of this road named John A. Macdonald, or we should get rid of these heritage buildings, blah, 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 blah. Actually, we should get rid of you. You're the problem, not the heritage buildings. You are, you communist, you. Get out. Right? I don't know. Big problems. Easy solutions, but we won't do the solutions that are necessary. It's very interesting. Here is Charlotte Gill, and she's talking about housing. The immigration thing was supposed to be on the housing as well, but here we are. The immigration, doctors, and Polyev, that was supposed to be balancing this one out, but it got moved earlier. But Charlotte says, house bidding resembles an application for a job, mortgage, or starring role in the West End. With dozens of unsuccessful attempts, you can smell the desperation. People routinely offer far above the asking price. Hear, hear. So London is increasingly unlivable. and Sadiq Khan is the only party to blame. No, I think that all of these policies are coordinated by a group of people who have the power to coordinate policies in this way, and we're seeing the results of their coordinated efforts. And I've got a documentary at the end of today's show, and the links should be in the description, that show just how deep these conspiracies go. It's a deep dive into the JFK assassination and the people who did that, and then the subsequent decades after that, and the things they got into after that. Very interesting speculation. I don't know if it's actually 100% true, but it's one of those things where people say, oh, conspiracies don't happen. Do you know how many people would have to be involved? It's much different than people think, I think. Like, the reality of the situation is
I'm here with
much different than people think. We have to talk about climate, because this is a huge thing that is going to be used more and more, because they're going to still try and get us locked down with climate change. Even though I've completely dismissed that, the public, these people are not able to read the signs. The public is done with this climate change nonsense. They don't believe it. And even if they did believe it, they do not believe that giving taxes to the Canadian government specifically, will actually result in any kind of difference to the carbon output or emissions or anything like that. Canada has committed $30-odd billion, billion with a B, to private companies to build batteries. And I think by the time the factories themselves get built, this whole thing is going to be a quagmire, like the gas plant was a quagmire for the Liberals. I don't think that the batteries are going to be ready. I think Volkswagen's backing off of battery tech. I think Ford's backing off of battery tech. There's all sorts of indications that this is not nearly what is being sold to us as. And Justin Trudeau is talking about the Volkswagen battery factory in St. Thomas and how good that is for business and so on and so forth, with a lady who owns a cafe. And I'm just not buying it. And the whole positioning of what the cafe owner says, I'm hesitant to play that because Justin Trudeau is terribly annoying, but I'll cue it up. Okay, so here it is. He's been talking for 30 seconds, which is far too long, but he says, it gives a big boost to everyone. Tell us what you think. Listen to what she says. Like, I just think it's super interesting when he says, tell us what you think about this battery plant being in this city, where she goes with it. Because it's not where you think it's not where you think.
It's going to give a big boost to everyone. Maria, can you tell me a little bit about what impact this factory coming to St. Thomas is going to have for you?
So for me, experiencing civil war, exile, being a refugee in a country that doesn't want you, I think forces you to look at the world in two ways. You can either be someone who looks at the world as full of opportunity, or you can look at it as a hopeless place. So I've always have looked at it in terms of opportunity.
Huh. Weird take. Could you talk about the battery plant? Weird, right? Weird. Experiencing civil war, experiencing being a refugee in a country that doesn't want me, blah, 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 blah. What are you talking about, lady? Can you talk about the gas plant? Can you talk about the friggin' battery plant, for crying out loud? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Danielle Smith says, a large majority of Canadians now view the carbon tax as just a tax that makes life more unaffordable and does nothing for the environment. Share if you agree that it's time to axe the carbon tax in 2023. The only thing I can think here is Mr. Poilievre is activating conservative premiers to bolster his electioneering message. And he is. This is axe the carbon tax is more sloganeering from Poilievre and his team. I like it. Honestly, it is coordinated. It is thoughtful. It resonates. I like it. As far as politics goes, this is the kind of stuff that you should be doing. It shows allegiance, alliance, coordination, all of that other stuff. The only thing I don't really like is that it seems like Poilievre is on the side of the WEF and the United Nations sustainable agenda, etc., and maybe part of the milk cartel, the dairy cartel. So, the fact that they can message well is terrifying, right? Because people are going to ignore it. They're going to say, look at what he says. And then when he gets in and does different things, there's going to be a smaller group of people who are upset with that. And I mean, well, it's going to take time. It's going to take time to roll out, because again, people will be, the relief that will be implemented with the taxes being reduced People will feel like they've gotten a raise. People will feel like, whew, the pressure's off. If he actually fixes, if Mr. Poilievre is actually economically intelligent and is able to deal with the inflation and the rates going very high, et cetera, then people will feel even more like he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. But I feel like that is going to mask all of the other things that move us closer to the 2030 agenda. So, right, like, oh, we can have economic prosperity while being a maggot farmer. You're just like, no, we've gone in the wrong direction. We're not milking maggots. We're not milking maggots for milk. It's not happening. It's maggot paste, and I'm not drinking that. It's not happening. Bernie's tweet says, Germany, oops, it's not the right sort of wind. So here's a windmill, and it's windmilling. It's being driven by the wind. And the other two aren't, which is interesting. So why aren't these two? But this one's, it's windy enough. It's so windy that this one falls over, right? These green technologies, this is $0 technology. There you go, right? Like, you're going to get power and you don't have to spend a dime because these things last forever. Oh, they don't last forever. It's nonsense. And you can't manufacture them without oil and gas. Will says, breaking, S&P Global, one of the largest independent credit rating firms in the world, has dropped ESG scores from its debt ratings after we exposed ESG for what it truly is, a scam used to force a political ideology onto the people. I hope we're turning a corner. It seems like, and we're going to get to the Trump stuff in a minute, but it seems like we're watching a bit of a show, and you sometimes can't tell people. You have to show them. They have to go through it, right? And so it seems maybe plausible, kind of pseudo-plausible, that this whole last couple of years has been a show to show us just how bad it could possibly get if we do nothing and let these lunatics run things. Viva Fry is responding to Scott Duncan. Scott Duncan has 113,000 followers. He's a Scottish meteorologist based in London. And Scott shared a meme. Hottest month on record, July 2023. Don't believe your firsthand experience of the month. Listen to me with my red map, right? Temperature difference compared to 1981-2010 average. If you take the temperatures from 1981 to 2010 and average them out, July 2023 is the hottest month ever. Get lost. What a ridiculous thing. That doesn't take anything into account. Holy shit. The Earth is not 40 years old. It's a joke. It's a joke. They have to be joking. They can't not be joking. It's a joke, right? He's a joke. What a joke. So Viva Fry says, imagine taking the infinitely small sliver of a time frame that the last 40 years of Earth history to make a comparison for July temperatures and thinking this is scientific evidence of a climate crisis. It's a level of hubris that only the most arrogant of humans can have. I choose to believe that he's kidding, and it's tongue-in-cheek. And he's having a good old belly laugh. Okay, here's O'Keefe Media, and let's talk about race really briefly. A citizen journalist has revealed Best Buy is partnering with McKinsey. I know them from the Canadian government's partnerships. Oh, McKinsey and Company on a management training program. The program is not open to white applicants. Candidates must meet the racial requirements below. I identify as darker skinned. Holy smoke. Yeah, you have to candidate. It's in bold right here. Candidates for these programs must meet the requirements below. Additional considerations will be given to those who have active developer plans. So, identify as Black, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, or Pacific Islander. Okay, I mean, I can identify as Hispanic. Si, senor. Right? No, that's it. That's all you need, right? I mean, I can identify as a woman with less. I mean, bam, I'm a woman. Okay, ma'am, it's ma'am now. Okay, so I can't identify as Hispanic. I would give it a try. Give it a try, right? All you have to do is not very much, because if I come in as an Hispanic woman and nailed it, right? Nailed it. Maybe a pregnant Hispanic woman, right? Come on. If they can play these games, why can't we, right? Jeepers creepers. This is easy to defeat. No problems. Greg, moving on. Greg says, Mr. Andy No was viciously attacked on camera, yet he sued his attackers and lost. So Andy No's trial went to trial, and people were covering it. And they had the attack on camera, the whole deal. And it looked like it was going to be a pretty well slam dunk case. This reminds me kind of the time where Kyle Rittenhouse was on murder charges for defending himself from that Antifa mob where he killed that guy because that guy was trying to kill him. And it just seems kind of like that, except in this case, the obvious choice, the obvious decision didn't get made. And the person was, well, the judge said that Antifa were trying to dox jurors. The lawyer for the other side declared, "I am Antifa," and told the jurors she'd remember their faces. Fully crazy. I mean, at that point, isn't it a mistrial? Like, can't you say, hey, that lawyer is intimidating the jury? I'm pretty sure you can't do that. I saw My Cousin Vinny, man. I'm pretty sure you can't do that. The Two Utes. It's such a good movie. Okay, Todd, let's talk about the U.S. and the crazy stuff that's going on in the U.S. So this is a 3-minute and 31-second interview. And at the end of the interview, she says that 4 states, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, sent letters to Congress asking for the electoral votes to be returned for further deliberation. Trump was right again. So this news was made yesterday. I'd never seen. I follow this pretty closely because I'm interested in it, and I fully, honestly, truly believe that this is an ongoing covert conflict, and the conflict is between people who want sovereign nations to rule themselves versus a globalist group who wants NWO. And I feel like this conflict is predicated on basically the 2020 election at this point in time. And if you litigate the 2020 election and you fix that problem, then the rest of the world follows suit. But if that continues to fester, then the rest of the world follows suit. And we're watching what happens when that continues to fester and the rest of the world's following suit. They're emboldened. They can do anything. They can do anything, right? And so if this is a show to show people how bad this can get, the illustration is very impactful, very effective. Here is why I think maybe it's a show, and maybe we're entering the third act, and the third act is when the hero comes back ready to fight, and like the good stuff happens. It's when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles defeat Shredder, right? Harry Potter dies, and you're like, oh man, this is not going to go well, right? Voldemort's got him, Hagrid's carrying him, everything's going to go to shit, right? Hogwarts is going to fall, and Dumbledore is dead, right? And like Voldemort's going to be in charge, right? And then boom, Harry's back alive, and him and Tom have to finish this. So it feels like the third act is about to start. This is why. Here we go.
The question back to the states of, do you believe that you sent the right slate of electors, or do you want to make any changes? And that's where the Liberals lost their mind, saying, oh, it would be a violation of Electoral Count Act. They say it's a violation of the Constitution. It is not a violation of the Constitution.
It's not.
It would potentially have been a violation of the Electoral Count Act.
I've got to stop you for a second. I got to tell you, I think you just broke news. And look, I do this for a living. I've never heard that the states were asking for them back. These individual states asked him to send them back, and Mike Pence said no?
Yes, 4 legislatures asked for their states.
Wow.
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia.
Was it Michigan? Georgia, okay.
Georgia all sent letters to a varying degree. Like, so from Pennsylvania, I think it was the president of the Senate with a certain committee. Arizona, I think it was most of the legislature. Wisconsin, I think, had a committee. And then I think in Georgia, it was, one committee chairman or something like that.
Nobody's reported that. They're all reporting that Donald Trump, basically under duress, was trying to get Mike Pence not to open the envelopes.
No, the states asked to have
That's huge.
their stuff back, and Mike Pence
Well, then he should have
no.
sent them back. How stupid is that? And by the way, once he opened it, there was going to be a challenge by the Senate and by the House.
Yeah.
And then we all know what happened, something that benefited Joe Biden and the Democrats, a riot at the Capitol.
Sorry, I thought I changed the thing over. I don't have all my stuff ready, but anyway, that's pretty interesting. And here's a bit of a chaser. This is Donald Trump reshared this on Truth Social. It starts out talking about electoral issues, but I want to fast forward it to the end part where she's talking about the end part. Here we go.
In the studio, good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
There's so many people putting this down as a political conspiracy theory, but actually there are real questions to be answered here.
There are?
Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are.
What he's being accused of, but what part do you think is to answer that the 2020 election is going to be re-litigated because of this? They've made a huge huge mistake with this one, because even though we thought what was going to happen was they were going to go after him for treason or sedition, but they did criminally charge him, but they didn't go to that extreme. As a result, he has due process, so he can subpoena people and bring things in. Now, let me say something about this 2020 election, is that Biden is the legitimate president, but he's the legitimate president of what is now the bankrupt U.S. corporation. And that was a treaty in 1871. Well, on September 12, 2018, Trump created an executive order. Within that, he outlined in future elections any kind of foreign or domestic interference, specifically for the 2020 election. So we say, how did he know some of these things were going to happen? Election integrity.
Okay, and I just have to cue it up to the end part. Okay, so this woman's a political analyst. It gives her name, Dr. something or other, at the beginning of this spot on GB News. So this is GB News Network. And here, what she's saying here, I've read about. I read about it in 2018, 2019. And this is the kind of stuff that you would hear on unbelievably wonky political discussion websites that most people would just dismiss as complete conspiracy and have no basis in fact, etc. Not most people. Like, what they're talking about is policy. They're pulling documents, public documents, showing people the executive order, showing the wording, showing the intent and potentially how it could be used. People have been talking about this stuff for a long time, but it seems like there are so many things like that don't pan out, or that people don't hear about, more often don't hear about, right? So she's talking about how Biden is the president of a bankrupt U.S. corporation, and this is the story of the bankrupting of the U.S. corporation. Here's that.
Because they assumed he broke protocol and walked in front of the Queen. No, if you go back and look at it, you will see he looked at her. She gave a wave with her hand. He proceeded. She took a couple of steps. He stopped and he waited for her to join. That was an optic to tell us that he then was going to bankrupt the U.S. corporation, because it was the Vatican, the Crown, and the U.S. that was part since 1871. And we were giving you our tax dollars. We were paying back. Forget this Tea Party and without taxation, without representation. We owed you a lot of money because you helped us in the Civil War. And so that is what Trump has now, he told the Queen, I'm ending this. We're dissolving this corporation. We're going to go back to being a republic and we'll all be separate. The Pope wasn't happy. You should find the picture of him visiting the Pope. It took 650 planes to remove our gold from the Vatican Bank.
I'm not very happy.
So 650 planes to remove the gold from the Vatican Bank. Here is that picture, by the way, right? These guys look like Melania. Maybe this is a funeral. Hold on. Here's another one. I just love the smile. Pope looks glum after Vatican meeting with Donald Trump. It looks like a funeral. It's very funny, but Donald Trump looks very happy. So the Three Cities Empire is what she was talking about. The planes full of gold to return the gold to the United States from the Vatican, so on and so forth. It sounds like conspiracy. It sounds like these people are crazy, right? But are they? It seems like moves, counter moves, and things happen at state level that you just honestly wouldn't believe, because maybe we don't know how things work at that level, but it seems like all of that stuff legit, very legit. So we'll see what happens. Is this a show and the third act is about to begin? I hope so. That would be so much fun. It would be so much fun. Holy cow. Clandestine. This is a good way to end the show today. Clandestine said, it's official. The DNC were running an armed covert election fraud operation in the swing states to take advantage of mail-in voting to steal the election. This is why the Dems push so hard for mail-in voting. This is why the mainstream media, CDC, NIH over-exaggerated COVID deaths. This is why deep state actors created and released SARS-CoV-2. All of it was one massive coordination to steal the 2020 election. They released the virus to make the pandemic. Then they exaggerated the virus to make everyone afraid to be close to each other. Thus, the public accepted mass mail-in voting. Then they used the excess ballots and fake registrations to commit voter fraud in all the swing states by ballot dumping at 3 a.m. once they knew how many ballots they needed to win. On top of this, they used the intelligence community and fantastic control over big tech to censor anyone who talked about the Hunter Biden laptop, COVID disinformation, or election disinformation. Anything that got too close to their plan to use a bioweapon to steal the election, they banned it from the internet. This was the most sinister crime in history: genocide, treason, global psychological manipulation. It's time to put Trump back in office and begin the reckoning. I believe the people have seen enough. Yeah, so there's a whole theory. It's called devolution. The devolution theory is basically that Trump knew they were going to steal the election in 2020. He put in place a military safeguard to allow the military to collect all the information they needed to allow. They allowed the criminals to commit the crime. They collected all the data. They collected all the information. Blah blah blah. They put it on a server somewhere. I've heard stories of the intercepts of the Dominion machine going to servers in Italy and China, and all of it being recorded basically, and the manipulations done there and being sent back to the Dominion machines, allowed to happen, but recorded, right? And so obviously, I don't know if it's true or not, but this is what I've heard, that this is all a massive sting operation, and the American people, the Western people, the world wouldn't believe. If Donald Trump came in and started arresting people in 2016, they would not believe him. They would arrest him and say he was a tyrant and a dictator, right? Because that's what people believed. That's what the mainstream media said. But look at what we've experienced the last couple of years from 2020 on, right? And if that was a part and parcel of disclosure to the public, that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. Is it true? I'm not sure. Here is a long 3.5-hour documentary. I was on a 3-hour flight the other day, and I watched this documentary, and this is basically the breakdown of the JFK assassination, the players involved, and what they did after the JFK assassination. And it's basically the government. So the government, the 3-letter agencies, blah, 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 complicated plot to take over control and maintain control of the government at any cost, including the assassination of a president and the installation of public puppets, etc., etc., etc. So is conspiracy at the level that I'm talking about to take down Trump using a bioweapon, blah, 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 all this stuff, the clandestine outlined, etc., etc., is that plausible? I think it certainly is. I think, without a doubt, it certainly is. Is it something that we've lived through? I can't prove it, but it seems like, yeah. It seems like, yep. It seems like this was supposed to be a masterstroke that was supposed to put us into slavery, and at this point in time, it didn't work. And now they're scrambling for a way to fix and salvage their problem, but they've just got more problems cropping up. So it's interesting. It's very, very interesting, and I don't know that they're going to find a way out of it. I don't know that anyone can stop what's coming. It seems like nothing can stop what's coming. That's just how it seems. Larry says, I went to the World Economic Forum as a spy. This is what scares me the most. In this episode of Ideas Have Consequences, I chatted with Jim Ferguson about this. Here's a hint, it's not good news for you. So this is, I've got a spot on my site here that I'm using now to kind of document documentaries and things that I'm watching. So that's there now. And it's one I haven't watched yet, but it's interesting to me. It's just on the other side, underneath all of the right-hand sidebar. If you're interested in watching any documentaries that I may be watching, you can check that out there. So I'll be posting things like that regularly or semi-regularly as I find them, because I found what's happening is I want to watch something and I'll watch the first 10 minutes and think, yeah, I definitely want to watch that, and then I'll put it somewhere and I can't find it later. I used to email it to myself, but then my emails got all clunky and it was just really bad. So I think this is going to work pretty well for me, and maybe it'll introduce you to something that you haven't seen as well. The Into the Light documentaries, it seems like they're doubled up. It seems like there is only one part. The part 2 is basically just part 1 rewrapped. I watched these as well. So anyway, regardless of all of that, what's going on is crazy, and I don't know that there's going to be a quick and easy fix, but it seems like perhaps we're being shown what's going to happen next. And 2024, I still think it's going to be crazy. Presidential election and the whole rest of it's going to be nuts. Anyway, that's enough of me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.